$4 trillion. Just take a second to really let that number sink in, because that is the staggering combined value of a brand new, highly concentrated index of private tech giants that are, quite frankly, fundamentally reshaping our world right now. We're talking about a scale of wealth and power that literally eclipses entire national economies. And it's all being generated by just a handful of companies. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the mathematical ascent of billion-dollar giants. We are looking at a small, elite group of hypergrowth companies that are totally defying traditional market logic. So how are they doing it? Well, they're rewriting the fundamental rules of the global economy as we know it and operating on a scale that almost defies comprehension.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the new unicorn economy, AI and the power law, the ascent to $1 trillion, decoding SpaceX's valuation, where is the AI revenue, and lastly, disruption across the economy.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the new unicorn economy. So, to really understand where we're going today, we first have to look at the massive shift in how startup funding actually works under the hood. The contrast over the last few years is absolutely stark. Consider the pre-ZIRP era, the period before zero interest rates flooded the market. Back then, we had this really tight, highly disciplined cohort of about 73 unicorn companies. And if you track them 20 quarters in, an impressive 80% of those companies had either successfully raised a new round of funding or completely exited. That's the hallmark of an incredibly healthy, functional ecosystem. But compare that disciplined reality to the bloated 2021 cohort. Suddenly, you've got this massive explosion of 479 companies hitting unicorn status. Yet, in that exact same time frame, less than 20% of them successfully raised new capital or exited. We were suddenly consuming vastly more cash than we were returning, and it created this massive, totally unsustainable imbalance in the market.
Now, when you look at that massive failure rate, you might naturally assume that all the money just dried up and vanished from the ecosystem, right? Well, here's where the math gets absolutely fascinating. Despite what looks on paper like a massive market correction, the actual funding per unicorn has increased 5 times since 2021. The absolutely crucial point here is this. The capital hasn't disappeared from the market at all. We just have far fewer surviving unicorns. And the select few that do survive the gauntlet, they're raising astronomically more money than ever before. The capital isn't shrinking, it is hyper-concentrating. Which brings us to Section 2, AI and the Power Law. So if the capital is heavily concentrating into fewer hands, who exactly is capturing this unprecedented wave of funding? Well, meet the new VIP list, what we can call the Magnificent Eight, or the $4 trillion index. It's a highly diverse, incredibly dominant group of companies. You've got SpaceX completely redefining space tech, Stripe and Revolut dominating modern fintech, Anthropic leading the charge in artificial intelligence, ByteDance commanding the internet space, and Endural revolutionizing defense tech. Almost every single one of these names has aggressively and consistently outperformed the traditional tech indexes we are all used to tracking. This right here is the tiny, elite group of mega winners capturing that massive concentration of global capital. And even within that exclusive group, the AI leaders are operating on a completely different plane. I mean, the growth rates we're tracking for OpenAI and Anthropic are simply unlike anything we've ever witnessed in the history of business. Think about established software giants for a second. Companies like Workday, ServiceNow, Adobe, Salesforce. These are massive, incredibly successful corporations that took literally decades to build their empires. Yet these new AI leaders blew past their scale in just a matter of months. At this current velocity, they aren't just growing, they're scaling with such ferocious speed that current estimates suggest they could completely eclipse massive, entrenched hyperscalers like AWS and all of Microsoft by the year 2028. Crazy, right? Let's move to Section 3, the ascent to $1 trillion. Let's look at the actual mathematical odds of surviving this high-stakes game. The reality of the power law is incredibly counterintuitive to how we normally think about business growth. Say you are lucky enough to be a billion-dollar unicorn. Your odds of reaching a $10 billion decacorn valuation are a mere 8%. It is an incredibly steep climb. Then going from 10 billion to 100 billion, the odds barely improve at all. They jump to just 13%. But look closely at that final step. Once you hit that $100 billion centicorn status, your odds of reaching a massive $1 trillion valuation suddenly jump to 31%. Why? Because the bigger you get in this ecosystem, the more deeply entrenched and durable your earnings become. The fundamental risk goes down, and your chances of achieving the next massive multiple actually go up. The power law accelerates wildly at the very top.
But please, do not mistake this for a smooth overnight success story across the board. The reality on the ground is often grueling. Take the semiconductor company Cerebras, for example. Long before their recent successful IPO, they went through a remarkably brutal multi-year grind. After their Series B funding round, they faced multiple years in the dark with zero new capital flowing in. They just had to put their heads down, stretch every single dollar, and relentlessly grind to develop their proprietary technology. All of that intense sweat equity and quiet endurance eventually culminated in a massive OpenAI contract that overnight quintupled the value of the entire company. It perfectly highlights that, even in a booming, cash-rich sector, ultimate survival and triumph require extreme endurance. Let's dive into Section 4, Decoding SpaceX's Valuation.
We hear about SpaceX constantly in the news, right? But how does the market actually value a private space exploration company? Intuitively, you'd think their valuation just scales directly, one-to-one, with the number of rockets they launch into orbit. More rockets equals more money, for sure. But if you divide their total valuation by the number of launches, the valuation per launch actually dramatically increases as their launch cadence goes up. Why does this happen? Because private investors aren't just paying for the raw hardware of rockets anymore. They're paying a massive premium because every single additional launch exponentially increases the fundamental quality, scale, and reliability of SpaceX's underlying business model.
This kind of compounding valuation doesn't just happen by accident. It builds strategically across 4 distinct phases of maturity. Phase 1 is the pre-constellation phase. Here, you're primarily launching rockets for government customers. It's unpredictable, highly customized, one-time revenue. But then, the business evolves into Phase 2, where you launch your own satellite constellation, like Starlink. Suddenly, you aren't just a launch provider, you've got highly predictable, recurring subscriber revenue pouring in from all over the globe. Then, Phase 3 takes this to scale. This is where you start launching multiple distinct constellations for various global enterprises and militaries who desperately want to control their own communication destiny in orbit. And finally, Phase 4 transforms SpaceX entirely, from a transport company into a complete technology platform. We're talking about space-based data centers and the ultimate optionality for colonizing the moon and Mars. That final platform transition is exactly where those massive, reality-bending valuation multiples come from.
Now for Section 5, where is the AI revenue?
Right now, across the entire market, there's a very loud, very public debate questioning if these massive AI valuations are built entirely on thin air and hype. Let me be absolutely clear here. These are not fake companies running on fumes. The AI ecosystem is generating an estimated $300 billion in hard revenue this year alone, and that staggering figure is fully projected to double by the year 2027. We are talking about real, fundamentally sound businesses that are compounding cash flow faster than anything we have ever seen in modern history. In fact, Anthropic even recently reported a highly profitable month, proving the unit economics can absolutely work. While the public market will ultimately be the great antiseptic that stress tests these long-term valuations, the massive cash flow being generated right now is completely undeniable.
So where exactly is that $300 billion actually coming from? Well, the first massive pillar driving this is consumer revenue. This is fueled by millions upon millions of individual monthly subscriptions globally, multiplied by a steadily increasing average revenue per user. But the cash machine certainly doesn't stop there. We also have the ad sector. Right now, about a quarter of all the advertising served by massive platforms like Meta and Google are entirely AI-enabled, but they're aggressively targeting 100% penetration in the coming years, which unlocks billions in new efficiencies. And perhaps the most lucrative of all is the enterprise pillar. We're seeing massive structural breakthroughs in cloud computing and automated code generation that are driving enormous multi-year corporate contracts. This AI revenue is already deeply and permanently embedded across every layer of the digital economy. Which brings us to our final part, Section 6, Disruption Across the Economy.
This unprecedented concentration of capital isn't just staying neatly confined within the borders of Silicon Valley either. It's aggressively rippling out to disrupt our daily lives across almost every major traditional sector. Take the telco industry, for example. Starlink isn't just some cool tech demo. It's directly attacking a massive $200 to $400 billion global profit pool, offering a very real future where you simply never experience a dropped cell phone call no matter where you are on Earth. Over in the energy and semiconductor semiconductor sector, these massive AI data centers are literally rewriting the fundamental energy grids and equations of entire states, like Pennsylvania, completely pushing the limits of our infrastructure. In the auto industry, legendary legacy brands like Ferrari are being forced to completely pivot and race toward autonomous and electric futures just to ensure their long-term survival. And looking at the consumer space, innovations like GLP medications are profoundly transforming global diet culture, slashing alcohol consumption and redefining general wellness. Make no mistake, the massive technological innovations funded by this heavy market concentration are transforming every major global profit pool simultaneously.
If there is one core, inescapable takeaway from this entire explainer, it's this: the power law rules our lives. The consolidation of massive, unprecedented financial gains into a remarkably tiny number of mega companies is the absolute defining economic feature of our era. The winners at the very top of this mountain are compounding their advantages faster than ever before in human history. And what that ultimately means is that the fundamental cost of not being positioned inside a winning company is higher today than it has ever been.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. We've seen in the recent past, like with the fierce battles in ride-sharing and food delivery, that vast amounts of excess capital eventually, and almost inevitably, lead to massive destructive price wars. So as these absolute AI titans like OpenAI and Anthropic amass hundreds of billions of dollars in war chests, will we soon see an unprecedented scorched earth price war as they clash for total, uncompromising market dominance? It's a fascinating question, and it's the exact dynamic that will undoubtedly define the next dramatic chapter of this incredible mathematical ascent. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep your eyes on the data.